What's good? The typical start of a video with the what's good. It's your boy B Phil here to go over the second part of this project, and that is implementing the client for our super cool reminder app. So, if you recall yesterday, what did we talk about? Well, we talked about a person needed to be reminded to do some stuff, and a cool app developer like me developing an app to help that person remember to do some stuff. And that app under the hood is using Amazon Eventbridge, which creates a rule that's tied to a default bus. And that rule is going to fire off like pew, 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 ever so often, depending on the user's preference, to an SNS topic or a Twilio application, or a phone number rather. It's going to send a request to some service on the back end that has some phone number that's going to actually send a message to this person to say, yo, bruh, time to do some stuff. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. What we're going to work on today is we're going to work on the client with some JavaScript. And how are we going to implement this? Well, look no further than, drum roll please, create T3 app. So this is a Next.js TRPC Prisma framework. If you don't know what all those are, I'm sorry, we're not going to go through those, but the base is Next.js, which basically starts to blur the lines between front end and back end. And that's why it's going to be great for this application, because we have one language, which is TypeScript, one language to rule them all. And that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and get started here. So what we want to go ahead and do is first, we want to go ahead and open up our terminal. So let me go ahead and bring the terminal onto the screen. And hold on one second here, y'all. Let's bring the terminal onto the screen. Can we not see the terminal? Can I have your attention, terminal? Will the real terminal please stand up? I repeat. All right, so that didn't work very well. So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I got to cut this, obviously. I thought I was going to be able to do this in one take, but clearly I'm not going to be able to do this in one take. So let's go ahead and hit the properties here. Let's make sure we got the right terminal. Doesn't look like it wants to give us the terminal. Windows 10. Oh, boom. There we go, y'all. Got the terminal on the screen. All right, so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go ahead and move to our projects. Next projects. Let's go ahead and say yarn create T3 app. All right. So we're going to call this super cool. And we're going to use TypeScript. Since this technically should have some authentication, because we want to make sure that it's reusable by other people, we won't go super deep into it. We'll do some quick implementation here, but create T3 app is going to give you the options to have next auth, Prisma, Tailwind, and TRPC. So next auth is a package to make auth easy. Let me just put it that simply. Prisma is a package similar to like an ORM, but it does so much more versioning of your migrations and very easy integrations with Postgres, MySQL, SQLite, which we'll be using in this project. Next, we have Tailwind CSS, which is a front-end styling library, which just makes it super easy to style stuff. And then, of course, TRPC, baby. And TRPC is going to allow us to bind data to particular types on the front end and the back end, so we know what we're getting on both sides. So we want to go ahead and send the phone number as some numbers. We know for sure the back end is going to get it as some numbers, and then we know for sure we can pass it back to the front end and it'll be a number as well. So we have this type safety, y'all. So let's hit enter. Let's start up a repo. And let's go ahead and run yarn install. All right, while this installs, let's just take a moment. All right, scaffolding, scaffolding, scaffolding. So what we're gonna go ahead and do first is we want to wait for this to install, of course. So why did the chicken cross the road? Well, chickens don't typically cross roads, so that's not a very good joke now, is it? Ba-doom, right? That was good, right? My bad jokes in the interim. I should have already have had this done. This might need to be cut, but who knows? Maybe I'll leave it in here just so you can see the process over time. But you can go ahead and skip ahead. There might be a few moments where it'll be irrelevant, but I'll cut these out so you don't have to do that. But for the meantime, in between time, you can go ahead and listen to me chat. So great. So we see we see that the get initialization failed. That's okay. So let's go ahead and move to our super cool directory and let's open up our code editor. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and minimize. All right, we're going to go ahead and minimize that, and we're going to go ahead and add our code editor to display. All right, let's do that. Boom. Great. Look at this. Beautiful. All right, so let's go ahead and great. So we want to say 3. Let's make sure that this fits. So you all, oh, I guess it won't let me resize. So let's hide that and hide that. And it looks like it definitely won't do what I want it to do. Yeah, let's delete that. All right, so that's okay. Let's keep it this way. Okay, so great. We can just roll with the punches. All right, so now as you can see, we have our project over here. It is a nice little starter template. And what we're actually going to use here is TRPC has this concept of routers. We go under server, go to our router, and we go to example.ts. This is where we're actually going to implement our logic on the back end to be able to create the scheduled rules that are related to the user being reminded at a particular time. So what we're going to go ahead and do first is we want to go and add AWS Eventbridge to our project. So what are we going to do? Let's go ahead and show you what we're going to do. We're going to go and go to the documentation for the Eventbridge client. So let's go ahead and just copy pasta. So we're going to do a yarn add AWS SDK client bridge. All right. Great. So we're going to go here. Boom. As you can see, we got it installing all beautiful and stuff. All right. And I just want to show you the process, right? This isn't magic. So as you can see on the actual page, as it's installing here, what we're going to do is we're going to input or import this particular functionality. So we want the Eventbridge client, but then we want the actual command. So what are we trying to do here? Well, let's think here. Well, we want to create some rules. So we go here, we look at the documentation, and we say, do they have any create rules? Doesn't look like they have any create rules. So what would be the next most likely thing? Well, maybe put rules. Oh, boom, put rule command. So what do? We go to the put rule command. We see We look all here. Okay, great. Creates or updates the specified rule. Rules are enabled by default or based on value of state. Okay, great. So let's see how they use it. All right, cool. So here we go. This is how they're using it here. So basically, this is the boilerplate, right? So what we'd want to do, and of course, over time, after you do this over and over, you memorize this, and you just become second nature. But you want to import the Eventbridge client, then we want to go ahead and create a client with config. We want to create a command with some input, and then we want to go ahead and send that command to Eventbridge to do stuff with, or AWS rather. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we'll go ahead here, we'll go back to our code editor, and we'll say import Eventbridge client and put rule command. All right, great. Now we have an Eventbridge client. Let's go ahead and create that client. So we'll create our client. We'll say const client equals, it should equal what? New Eventbridge client. And we should have some particular config here. Then what we want to go ahead and do is say Eventbridge, or rather put rule input, and then we have some new input, which let's go ahead and talk about this for a second. When we look at this input, what it's saying here for this put rule input, it's going to be put rule command, right? So we went here, this is command, it's going to expect some input. And as you can see here, right under here where I'm highlighting, it has put rule command input. Let's go ahead and open up that in another tab. And this is going to tell us what the valid fields are. So all we're going to do is pass it a JSON object. More on JSON later if you're not sure what I'm talking about, but more on that later. So we're going to pass it a JSON object. And what we do is we just look here simply, and we look at theoretically where it should say required, but as you can see, none of this is required. So as we saw in the actual diagram, we're going to need an event bus. And so you see here the ARN of the event bus. If you omit this, the default event bus is used. So what we actually just need is the name. So Brandon, how do we do that? Well, great. I'm glad you asked. So what we would go ahead and do, let's go ahead and look here. So we go back to our code editor, and we're going to say here, right? Because we want to go ahead and have the actual, well, hold on, let's go here. Let's say put rule command, and let's have some input. And in this input, we have a name. And we should have a name. And super cool rule 1. Let's give it that name. So let's do that. And great. So now we have a new rule command. And then what do we do here, right? So we go ahead and say const response, right? Because we want to capture the response in a variable. And we say client dot send, and we want to do put rule input. And then next, what we would do, right, when we're looking at TRPC, we would want to actually put it down here inside of our resolve. So quick rundown of TRPC. What we're doing here is we're basically creating a way or an endpoint for our front end to call. So think of this as an API endpoint for our front end to call with either a query, which typically is to look up information, or some type of mutation, which is usually to change information. So this actually would change to mutation. And we go ahead and change this, add rule, right? And what are we expecting from the front end here? Well, for our use case right now, very simple use case, we just want a name. So let's just say name. Let's say rule name. Great. We say here, what do we want to return? Well, we want to return data, and then we want to return the response. Right? So on our front end, we can get the response, and then we can tell if it was successful or not, and we can handle that on the front end with the user. So what are we saying here now? Okay, well, we're going to go down this input. We see we want a rule name to be passed. We want in our resolve function, which is going to be some here, in this case, some asynchronous call. And we're going to go ahead and do the response here. Right, because we've defined our information at the top. And let's go ahead and do the response here. As you can see, we're getting an error. So it's expecting some type of configuration. So here's where we would want to go ahead and do some configuration object. And that is going to be related to, without further ado, yeah, boy, we're going to go back to AWS. And what you would want to do here in AWS is you would want to go ahead and create a user or another user, so you can go ahead and get a access key and a secret key. So you would simply go add user for this role. Let's go ahead and say super cool. And what we want is the access key for programmatic access. And then we want to go ahead and add it to our standard group. And then we want to go ahead and review, and great, we create our user. All right. So as you can see here, we have our user. Now what we want to do is take this access key and this secret key and put them in our environment. Now, I'm not going to do that in this video. That's going to be another discussion, but I just wanted to go ahead and demo this really quickly. And that's pretty much it at this point. So what did we do so far? We went ahead and we got a nice, neat little framework. And in this framework, what we went ahead and did was we imported the Eventbridge client. We did the put rule command. We instantiated the client. We instantiated the put rule command, and we added the response to, we added the client send so that we could get a response from our AWS account to create the actual rule. And that's pretty much it for the beginning of the backend. So without further ado, we're going to go to the front end. Actually, looks like we're coming up on 18 minutes here, and I want to keep these short and sweet.